The Mistwalker. Written by Argus SM. Read to you by the very same man. Chapter 1. The armored military transport bounced and buckled as it drove through the snowy mountain pass. The back cabin of the transport was dark, only illuminated by a couple of dim red lights scattered around the space. Worst of all, it was cold to the bone. Millie could not stop shaking. She looked like she was huffing up clouds. The other four that were in the same position as her were not doing any better. The two personnel, however, were unfazed. These guys were decked out in jet black armor, with the only color coming from their yellow visors. The trip seemed to have been going on for a couple of hours when the light suddenly turned from red to green. One of the side hatches opened up across from Millie, staring into the white, snowy world. One of the personnel grabbed a passenger and started to drag him towards the opening. The passenger struggled against the personnel, which didn't help him in the slightest. The personnel shoved the passenger toward the opening, then followed the shove with an armored strike to the face, sending the passenger into the pitch white of nothing. Millie gulped. The lights then turned back to red as the side hatch closed. This process repeated for what seemed like every 20 minutes until it was only Millie left. Then it was her turn. The lights turned green, and she was escorted over as the side hatch opened. She didn't struggle, but that didn't stop the personnel from cracking an elbow into her face, sending her into darkness. She thought she heard someone say, "Sorry, kid," but that was probably just her scared, depressed self telling her that. God. How did this happen? The whole journey to this frozen hill started when Millie's parents passed away due to an accident only a few months back. The village she lived in was already struggling in every possible way. She would just be a burden, so there was no choice but to send her into the orphanage program. With Millie being 14 years old, she had no choice but to go along with it, and somehow, she got sent to these frozen lands. Millie dazed back to reality sometime later, with a face full of snow. She got up slowly, wiping the snow from her face. The heavy snowfall had already masked the convoy's tracks, leaving her with no idea where she was. The frozen temperatures were getting to her. Her body felt like it was freezing over, as if her dark pink hair was freezing into icicles. Her peach skin would soon turn as white as the snow. Her navy blue eyes felt like orbs of ice. The black, pink tiger striped t-shirt and beige-colored slacks were definitely not helping Millie fight the cold. The brown hoodie barely kept any heat within. She needed to find warmth, and that started by going deeper into the frozen forest. After a short time of traveling, it seemed that her journey was coming to an end. She was losing feeling in her legs and arms. She felt as though she was dragging herself through the snow. Every time she breathed out warm air, cold air would come in, almost freezing her throat solid. The last nail in the coffin was the path she was taking, which was turning into a very steep incline to the top of the mountains. She looked around, maybe for a place to rest. She saw something, maybe 70 meters to her right, a light coming from a cave on the base of the mountain. Could be a fire. Could also be her delusional insanity playing tricks on her. What difference did it make? It would lead to a rest, long or short, it did not matter. She dragged herself into the cave and collapsed next to the fire. "What the hell is wrong with you?" came a voice in the shadows. A large figure came out of the darkness. Probably a man, but Millie couldn't make him out. "Hold on," he muttered as he lifted Millie up and threw her arm over his shoulder. He sat her down on a boulder across the fire. She had a nice view of the fire and the blizzard outside. The boulder also felt like a nice chair for all she cared. The man pulled up her pant legs and left into the shadows once more. He returned a minute later with a couple of soaked rags. They actually looked more like shirts. He then started to wrap them around her legs. "These should help get rid of the frostbite and the blisters. They are pretty damn hot, so you're probably going to start feeling it pretty soon." He nodded at his handiwork. He then grabbed a gray jacket and slid it on Millie. She noticed it was already warm. "I already lit the heating foam from inside it," the man said. "It's surprising the kid died with it on. Probably never had a chance to light it himself." The feeling started to return to Millie's body, and with that, pain as well. She started to squirm. "You'll get used to it," the man assured her. "At least you're moving. That'll help." The time passed in silence. Millie was starting to feel a bit better, almost like a human being again. Her vision was also starting to improve, which she didn't notice had faded. She was now starting to get a good look at the man who helped her. He seemed older, maybe in his late 20s. He wore a lot of dark, heavy clothing, which didn't go well with his pale skin and ginger hair and beard. He also had hazy gray eyes. "Are you just going to stare at me, or are you going to say something?" he asked over the crackling fire, seeming slightly annoyed. "Why?" Millie muttered. "What do you mean, why?" he asked. "Why help me?" "Because I'm not a fan of cleaning up corpses on my doorstep," he replied. Millie chuckled at that one. "And it doesn't hurt to start gaining people you can trust." Millie frowned. "Why would that matter?" "I think it matters for any situation in life," the man replied. "Speaking of which, whose husband did you sleep with to get you wound up here?" "Huh?" "It's a joke. How old are you anyways?" "I'm 14, and my name is Millie." The man sat there, stunned for a moment. "I guess names are important. Name's Gorge. 22 years old, and, before you say it, yes, I do look older. That's what experience does to people." Millie slowly nodded, and she guessed it made sense. "Where did you get all the clothes?" Gorge smiled. "At least you're being a little chatty now. I got them from the dead." His smile turned into a look of interest. "They're telling me you didn't see a single body on your way up here?" "Not that I saw a lot." Millie's look of horror was all the answers Gorge needed. "The clothes came from a group of people, probably about 5. Probably died from frostbite or something. I stripped them of everything useful because the dead are dead and the alive need to stay alive." The snowstorm began to die down just like the fire in the cave. Gorge nodded and got up. "It's time to go, Pinky." "It's Millie. And where would we go?" she asked, annoyed by the nickname. "You really have no idea what's going on?" Gorge questioned, but Millie just shrugged. "I'll give you a little input on the way." "On the way to where?" Millie continued to ask. Gorge gave a heavy sigh, getting a bit irritated with the stream of questions. "Come on." They started trekking through the frozen forest. The blizzard had died down to a light snowfall, and it wasn't too cold for Millie. "So, do you have any idea where you are, or even the slightest idea on what's going on?" Gorge asked. Millie just shook her head. "The only thing I know is that I got dragged in here when my parents died." "Ah," Gorge muttered with realization. "So you would be in the orphan category." Millie frowned, looking at him with a bit of confusion. "Okay, well, there's 3 types of people in these parts," Gorge continued. "One is the orphans, like yourself. Self-explanatory. Next are some outlandies, the people on the outside of the empire to the west side of the continent. Most of those outlandies are petty criminals, I'd assume, taken from their little towns because no one is going to vouch for those kinds of people." Gorge gave a sigh, catching his breath as they continued their walk. "The last type are going to be the state criminals. Those guys are pretty much high-end murderers, mercenaries, and thieves who have been doing business in the Empire until they were caught. Instead of banishing them to the Outlands or just outright killing them, they sent them here for really I have no clue what." Millie nodded slowly, trying to digest it all. "I know. A lot to take in," Gorge acknowledged. "What are you?" Millie asked. Gorge shrugged. "Small-time outlandish thief," he answered. "The Hyperic's army just walked into my village and took me away. I don't even know why they did it. They usually send criminals out there instead of collecting them and bringing them back in." "I'm sorry," Millie muttered. "Nah," Gorge brushed it off. "My life hasn't improved or gone downhill since they took me away. It's just been a different setting is all." "So you don't know where we are?" "Nope. All I know is that we're supposed to find this place called Missionary Ward. And before you ask," Gorge continued, "I learned most of this from listening to the guards and others from my travels as a prisoner to this place." "How do we find it?" Gorge sighed. "I know my sense of direction and which way the convoy was going. And hopefully we'll find tracks of others looking for the same place." "Can't we just run away?" Millie asked. "Ha!" Gorge laughed. "We'd be dead before we found anything. We have no supplies, no weapons, nothing. The ward will at least have food and shelter, even though our troubles will probably not end there. And speak of the devil." Gorge knelt down and found some footprints in the snow. "We're lucky. The snow hasn't buried them yet." They followed the tracks until they got to a road. The snow was compacted into the ground. Millie didn't realize how good it felt to not have snow up to her ankles. The road was filled with footprints heading in one direction. It didn't take Millie and Gorge long to find the missionary ward after that. They climbed over the last hill and found the fortress. It was huge. Built from solid stone, the fortress was surrounded with towers and walls in the shape of a hexagon. A tower on each corner was connected with the stone walls. This was repeated in a second layer of defense, followed by the infrastructure of the buildings on the inside. The 6 towers also connected to a central tower in the middle of the entire facility. There was also a fenced line surrounding the place a kilometer out. Millie could see a group of a couple hundred people at the bottom of the hill she and Gorge were on. They hurried to the bottom. There were campfires scattered throughout the group as people waited calmly for the gate to open. No one said a word, except for the people at the base of the gate, who were trying to claw their way in, muttering some words that Millie couldn't make out. She could also see some bodies that had collapsed at the base of the gate, losing the will to fight any longer. Without saying a word, Gorge made his way into a group by the campfire and Millie followed his lead. They sat next to the fire and nobody batted an eye. The people here were both men and women of mostly all ages and race. Millie saw some people as young as her, and people who were probably as old as her grandparents. Yet they all had to do one thing, and that was to be patient and wait.